I guess my first question is what brought you to senior college? How did you get involved in senior college?
Um, well, when I retired, um, I'd heard about senior college and was drawn by courses. And at that time when I joined, it was all face to face.
Mhm.
So, we were meeting at the Hutchinson Center, and, there was not only the courses, but, there was all the camaraderie and the food and the coffee and I had a couple friends here in the neighborhood, and they would take classes too. And there were times when we actually take the same class together. So we would talk about the class in between sessions. Um, and I was really struck by the high quality of the the programs that were being put on.
Mhm.
I mean, I took programs in short stories. I took programs in science. I took a physics class. After many years of not taking, high school or college science classes. Um, there have been some wonderful history classes. Um,
Like Bob's. No, that's Zoom, but
Yeah, well, but but I took some stuff with Bob before,
uh,
and then there were some wonderful political history kinds of classes. Oh gosh, I'm blocking on his name now. Um,
Mary Litchfield? No.
no, no, it was about there. We have a faculty member who does things about the Soviet Union and
Oh,
about
Dick
Russia.
Topping.
Dick Topping, that's right. And
Yeah,
his classes have been absolutely wonderful.
he's coming back. He's teaching a
Good,
class this spring
good.
on
He
the
he
state.
does wonderful work.
Yeah.
So, so I've taken writing courses, um, also. So I don't remember how many courses I've taken, but I've taken quite a few and never regretted it. So,
And so what got you into teaching a course? What was the
well, um, well, part of it was, I actually became a member of the board before I taught a class, and I looked around the table at a board meeting and realized that probably half the people there had actually taught a class, and I have a background in teaching. I have a master's of arts in teaching, and so I taught for a number of years at the junior high level. But then, after doing that for a few years, I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, and changed careers.
Was
And
that in Baltimore that you taught junior high? No.
well, it was right outside of Baltimore. I taught in Towson, Maryland.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I taught at Ridgely Junior High, and taught seventh and ninth graders, and that was a wonderful experience. And the problem was, I mean, one of the great ironies of life is you you fall in love with some things and you fall in love too much. And my problem with teaching is I had it was impossible for me to turn it off. I was thinking about my kids, and I was thinking about the next
Oh,
class and the
it's
class
their
after
life.
that all the time. And I was wearing out. And um, and so um, um, and so I still cared about people, and I had been doing some volunteer work as a counselor, both um, as I worked for the American First Friends Service Committee as a volunteer counselor for some time, and then I also did with Jan. We actually helped run a church coffee house for a couple summers, um, and the point of the church coffee house was to provide an alternative to going to places where uh, chemicals were readily available. Let me put it that way. And so this was sort of a drug prevention activity on the part of the Presbyterian Church in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. So you went from Maryland to New Jersey.
Yeah, but I was but the New Jersey thing was just in the summer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so I did that, and uh, and when I was in college, I actually was in a tutoring program
Mm.
that we did some tutoring of kids in
So
inner city
that's
New
why you
Jersey,
slipped
in
in.
inner city Newark, and so anyway, so I'd done some one-on-one kinds of work, and I really liked that. I felt that it was a lot easier than some of the demands of running a classroom where you're doing a certain amount of crowd control. And so when I came to Maine, um, I I changed careers and became first a substance abuse counselor and then an employee assistance program professional. And and that's what I did. And eventually, I got so important and valuable that I became a regional manager. I kept on counseling. I was really not going to give that up altogether, but I kept counseling, and it was really very satisfying work. And it was nice because uh, employee assistance program work is not just therapy, but you do an awful lot of group work and you do an awful lot of education and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was one of those jobs where all my skills are being used all the time, pretty much. So,
Well, see, I remember you and I came on the board around the same time, and
yep.
I was chaired the curriculum committee, and I remember something came up, and I remember you're sitting there next to me, or right around the corner, and you said, maybe I'll teach a course on boating. Now, I remember that very clearly. And the next thing you know, we had gotten um, a proposal for a course on boating. That was your first course.
Right, right. Yeah, it was called For the Love of Boats, as I
A lot of
remember.
boats. And it got very good reviews and people loved it. And then all of a sudden, boom, COVID hit
Yep.
long after that. And then you put in a proposal for teaching a course on, I love the title of, I never thought I would write poetry. Perfect title. I can remember somebody on the committee, that title's just too long. Well, no, it summed up perfectly. It covered you. You never thought you would write poetry. You thought you would teach, you thought you would counsel, you thought you would administer, but you never thought you'd write poetry. So it was a Zoom course. So how did you feel about doing it on Zoom? What was your initial, I mean, you jumped
Well,
in.
I was kind of nervous about it. Um, uh, um, well, I was nervous not only about the technology, but I was really nervous about what I'd learned about using a slide program like Keynote or I can't remember the other choices, but Google has one
There's
and
the
so on.
one, they all,
And I was kind of nervous about being able to manage the technology. And it took me, for my first course about boats, it took me a couple months to put together the slides and everything for that class. And I was kind of nervous about going through that again with another class with the additional complication of making whatever I was doing compatible with Zoom.
mhm.
Um, the other issue for me around Zoom is that you and I, are talking to each other with just our shoulders and heads. And that's not how I work. I mean, 100 years ago, when I was taking courses in public speaking and teaching and stuff, I
You
mean,
use
one of the things that everybody was saying is that, you need to interact with the people you're teaching as if you're a 5-year-old because they use their whole bodies
mhm.
to make the point. Okay. And and Zoom makes that harder. It's not impossible, but you have to come up with a way of being expressive in
Well,
a way
I
that
think
people can connect to.
that's why I know a certain very good teacher, many years of experience, who teaches a foreign language, and she will not teach on Zoom because she feels like she has to push herself into it. Um, And I think there is a way to do that. We haven't reached that point yet. Some of the senior colleges have developed these alternative camera things where you really can do that. But then to me, it feels artificial. If I don't have
Mhm.
people there and walk over and put my hand on a desk, or, get close to somebody and say, how do you feel about that? But anyway, you have to, this all feels very 22nd century, when you think about it. It's like something out of Space Odyssey 2001, but it's all we've got right now. How did you think your class worked? I mean, I can tell you how I think your class worked, but how did you feel once you put it all together?
Well, I mean, I felt very fortunate. I mean, the program that I was using was Keynote, which is Apple's slide program. And for me, uh, I needed uh, I needed it to be really interesting. I needed the slides to provide information. I needed the slides to provide visuals. I wanted to have music involved, and the program made a lot of that possible. Now, it
Mhm,
wasn't completely compatible with Zoom, but it was pretty close.
mhm.
And um, and so I felt that at least I had a grounding that I was familiar with, and I needed to rehearse a few times, and I needed to play with the program, and all that, and I felt that I was able to do something that worked for me as well as for the students.
Well, and
Um,
as a student in the class, I found it a most satisfactory class. I like the size of it. I like the fact that we weren't, 70 people, that there was conversation, that we could get to know each other a little bit. And I have gotten to know people from your class because of your class.
oh, good, good.
I,
Yeah,
I
well, I wanted that to happen, and I wasn't sure how well that would work because I didn't want people talking over each other, and
I didn't
and
feel
I
that.
really wanted people to be able to exchange, not only ideas and reactions to what I presented, but also at some point maybe to even share some of what they'd written, and they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your your slides were really wonderful, and I'm teaching a class coming up on tea, the art of tea, the ritual of tea, and the history of tea.
Uh-huh.
Getting into the Japanese tea, and it's interesting because I'm going to do the first week will all be about the Asian experience with tea. Really, the Chinese are the ones who founded tea, even though the Indians want to take credit for it. But the simplicity of tea and the simplicity of the haiku is something that it made me think back to your class and about some of the haiku that we read about nature. But tea is of nature. So you see, it really meshes very, very well. I'm just very, very taken with the whole Asian experience, which I think you kind of reawakened in me. Um, what what are the did you see advantages to Zoom that you might not have seen in a regular classroom? I mean, aside from the fact you had somebody from, wasn't she from South Berwick in your class? Where was, wait a minute, there was somebody from a long way away who wasn't right
Well,
here.
there were people from outside of Waldo County. Yeah, yeah.
That,
I don't remember how many offhand.
it's just the fact that one or two people who we don't know would come here for a class, to me is a real advantage of Zoom. Um,
Well,
okay.
if I can sort of speak out of turn, is that the
Oh,
poetry group of which I'm involved with, we have somebody who's attending our group from California.
it's not Mary, is it? Is my name Mary?
No,
No,
no, no,
okay.
no.
Because I'm in two classes with I'm in one class with somebody. I've been in two classes with Mary Kowalski from San Francisco. And I'm just amazed, how she summers here once in a while. And some friend here said, you might be interested. And here she is. She's
Yeah.
a member of our senior college and taking classes, and she's delightful. So I find that really, I mean, we joke when class would start that we were all wrapped up shivering and she had on a short t-shirt and the window was open and what a difference. Would you teach again with Zoom?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking, well, depending on the overall reaction to my class, I'd probably teach either one of those classes again.
Mhm.
Um, but I might change the format because there were a couple things that Keynote uh, couldn't do with Zoom. And I understand that a couple of the other, computer formats,
Really?
work better with Zoom in terms of being able to embed some things.
Um, we did hear the other day that senior college, that Hutchinson is going to equip possibly a couple of classrooms with the Zoom capability. So you
Hmm,
would be able to teach a class, but also have it go out over Zoom to people who can't get there, which
right,
means we wouldn't lose your California student, or we wouldn't lose the one in
right.
South Berwick, or the teacher from Massachusetts. So, it does make the world, it does shrink the world. I mean, that's something that technology has done. And you have to sometimes, I guess, look for good things in technology, but certainly during COVID, whew, it's been a good thing.
Well, the other thing that that is wonderful about Zoom is that you get to see people's faces. I think we're all suffering, from face withdrawal.
Right.
That it's really embarrassing sometimes walking around town, trying to get some exercise wearing your mask, and you go by somebody and you don't recognize them, and there's somebody that you know and know quite well. And
Yeah.
it's just because they weren't wearing their usual coat or not their usual hat or
It's
something.
terrible. It's just
Yeah.
awful. I hate it. And if you wear glasses and need glasses, that's also terrible. I have yet to find, they say if condensation gets on your glasses, it means your mask doesn't fit properly. So I've just decided I've got to go mask shopping one of these days. But anyway, well, that's sort of one final thing. What brought you to Belfast? This is
Oh,
something that, I think everybody in senior college, um, for the most part, people in senior college have come from other places.
right.
Not a lot of, I mean, there are some,
Well,
there are
we
some
didn't come
local.
far. Jan and I moved here from Bangor. We were part of the Back to the Land movement and realized that we were basically townies. And so we lived in downtown Bangor for many, many years, raised
Mhm,
our children there. And then after they left we began to think about where else we might want to live, and preferably closer to the shore, and preferably in a community that was supportive of the arts,
mhm.
because my wife is an artist. And so, we began to shop and looked all up and down the coast. Um, I'm, uh, it's really important for me to be close to water because I kayak and I sail. And Belfast ended up being a perfect place for us. My wife is absolutely, delighted to be here because of the nature of the community, and the extent to which arts is an important value, not only in Belfast, but, down in Rockland and Camden and what have you. And I'm right by the water. I mean, I'm not on it by any means, but I'm close enough to the harbor to enjoy it.
And you don't mind the cold, you told me once before.
No, 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 my wife and oh, no. I mean, when we were living down in Maryland before we moved to Maine, I mean, we were miserable in the heat. I don't like hot weather.
The heat was awful there, because you had nothing to compensate for it. There was no breeze from anywhere. I mean, you can go to, the Gulf Coast and get a breeze from the water occasionally, or even Florida has a breeze occasionally, but no, you. Um, before we leave, again, your background, because I know this, but I think it'd be nice for people in senior college to know your childhood to some degree. One particular fact sticks in my mind, and that has to do with Joseph Stalin. So oh,
That's
incredible.
that's funny. Well, it's a memorable factoid.
It is. It is.
Well, my father was a Foreign Service officer, and during the war, he'd been a naval officer, an engineer, and realized that towards the end of the war, because he had a certain amount of time on his hands, he began to think about what he wanted to do next. And he realized that the world was going to be different, that the Soviet Union was going to be really important. And he applied to become a Foreign Service officer and managed to pass all the tests and what have you and became one. And so he was a Soviet specialist.
Well, this must have been under John Foster Dulles, right? About that time?
Yeah, well, yes, I think that's probably true. He became a Foreign Service officer, and I think oh, I'd say late 45 or early 46.
Oh, so well before John Foster
Oh
Douglas.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Oh, and George Marshall was Secretary of State. I mean,
oh yeah,
that
yeah.
was a wonderful time.
Well, yes and no. It was because our Foreign Service was very much modeled on the British
Right.
way of doing it. It was very elitist, and it was
Took a while for that to
it
change.
wasn't very favorable. I mean, it was not pretty much a white man's club, and the emphasis was not only on white but men. So it was difficult for women to do it as well as for people of color to be involved. And my parents' first post was in the Dominican Republic. That's where I was born,
Oh,
and there was clearly an expectation that my mother was, as the wife of a junior officer, was expected to do some household chores for the ambassador, if you can imagine.
oh, I'm not surprised. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
surprised.
So anyway, but the point of all this is that because he was a Soviet specialist, I traveled with my dad and mom wherever they went, and in the early days, um, after the Dominican Republic, my dad went back to school, and then we ended up in Finland, and then his first,
Oh, fabulous.
Soviet post was Moscow,
Yeah.
back in 1951, maybe something like that,
Oh,
51.
we were
Yeah,
in Europe at the same time. I
yeah.
was there from 47 to 54.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
was, I remember the Berlin airlift. That sticks out. And I mean, I was old enough to remember, and the fear that we were going to go in the car because
yeah.
the Soviets would come marching in and take over Germany. I mean, there was a lot of
Oh
frightening.
yeah,
We
yeah.
had an escape route to Holland, and we would get back to this country through Holland. But there were also spies everywhere. I mean, everybody was a spy in those days. I can remember. In fact, speaking of spies, you may have heard about this, but this was highly recommended to me. This is Adam Sisman. It's John Le Carre.
Oh, it's a biography.
It's a
Oh, I bet it's really
biography.
good. Yeah.
Robin Kruger says it's one of the better books she's read, that it's fabulous. Well,
Okay.
I checked it out on
Okay.
Amazon. It was $56 on Amazon. And I thought, well, now it has to be, it would have to have John Le Carre with it for me to pay that much money. But I went on something called, I forgot what it was called. Oh, sell back your books. I don't know. I paid $5.56 for it, which I thought was a real bargain. But what a wonderful, treat.
Okay. I'm sorry, wait a minute. I'm writing this down. Who wrote it?
Adam Sisman, Sisman. And Robin told me the funniest little thing out of it. Said that when he was once he had become successful as a writer, and his name was Campbell. I mean, he was not John Le Carre. He had
Right.
that name, that his kids used to, for his first birthday after his success, they made a great big poster that said, "Keep calm and Le Carre on." And that sort of stayed with him. But no, I just, and that's the
Yeah.
funny part about that period. You had, State Department people, you had attaches from all the services, you had, um, I mean, it was just such a mixture of people in some of these European posts.
Mm.
You just never knew whether they were, well, of course, it wasn't, was it CIA then, or was it still OC? I don't know. I don't know what was
Oh,
it,
the OSS,
OSS?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Well, it was all in transition.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've read some fabulous books about the start of the CIA. I mean, just wonderful things about, what's his name? Jesus Anglin was, uh, you know, Jimmy Singleton Angleton, known as Jesus Angleton, who was one of the, he shaped the CIA in that period quite. But, the Episcopal High School in Alexandria fed a lot of people into those services. It was considered the good thing to do, talk about white crowd. Well, this has been interesting. I hope,
Well, let me just add one more quick story is that when I was there, I mean, when I was there, I was actually in kindergarten, so I didn't know who Joseph Stalin was at all. But
Mhm.
the embassy at that time was actually right on Red Square. And so out my living room window, you could see the Kremlin and all its towers and wall and everything like that. And
Fascinating.
but I was too young to be at that point to be, intimidated or anything. But when I went back and when I was, we went back again in the late 50s, and I was a seventh and eighth grader. And I remember being trailed by KGB people.
Yeah.
Um, if I went to the barber shop alone, or if we went on a Sunday drive, there was always, one or two vehicles making sure that they kept us in sight and so on.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
did you live in the embassy compound then, right?
Well,
Or was it
when I was there in the early 50s, there
reserved
were apartments in the embassy
yeah.
building, and we were in one of them. But later on, diplomats of all kinds were, including Americans, were kind of scattered around town, and so there were Americans in our building, but the Red Chinese were next door,
Mhm.
and other diplomats were in other parts of the building.
I remember, I guess about 1951, or maybe, about 51, we went from Heidelberg to Berlin, and you had to go through the Russian sector
Yeah.
for some reason, driving. And I remember a snowy night and winding roads, and my father had an old 48 Buick Roadmaster, and my brother and I were in the back, and all of a sudden, a checkpoint, and these Soviet guards came out with guns with bayonets on them and asked for papers, and daddy got out and he had his uniform on, and they talked and they let us go through. But I remember, just sitting at the window, just so excited, what's going to happen next, and then getting into Berlin and visiting friends there from Richmond. They were from Richmond, Virginia, and so we stayed with uh, an officer stationed in Berlin, and he took us all around, and we went to the Brandenburg Gate, and my mother said, "Now you stay right here with me, don't go wandering off, and if you don't you get anywhere near that structure." Of course, I immediately made a beeline for the structure, and I was told you could not go on that side. That was only for the Russians. And I put my foot over just to see. Nothing happened. So I thought, big, brave Nancy. And it was pretty
That's so in character, Nancy.
oh, yes, just test it, see how far I can go with it. Okay, now my instructions from Mr. Arthur,
Yeah.
first off, to thank you profusely for being willing to do this,
Oh,
on top of the fact, I have to admit, I have not done all of the thank you notes for the teachers. And I feel badly about it, but I thought somebody from the curriculum committee was doing it, and they're not. And
uh,
so in a gesture of, I don't know what kind of gesture it was. I was sort of piqued, if you will, that no one was going to do it. I said, I'll take care of it. So um, Lila Nation brought me the note cards last week. I've written 4 of them. I haven't written yours or Brenda's because I don't know your addresses, and I've gone through all my papers and I can't find my old forms. So I need your address to officially send you a note, or I can
Okay.
send it via email.
Whichever what would you
I'll
rather
do
do?
email. That's it. Email is a lot easier. It just, I
Okay,
don't
that's
know,
fine.
it's so
Great.
much. We used to have
Now,
people to do all this. Now that I've told you I was going to thank you, I've got to say we have to take 5 seconds and be quiet so Al will know that this is the end of the Jim Owen show. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
bye.
Take
Do you
care.
want to keep on talking or do we
No,
have to
I
stop?
can. I have to be quiet because he has to splice it here.
Oh, okay.
They're my instructions from Al. So,
All right. Well, we need to, we need to do what he says.
yes, we do. Al is in charge.
That's right. Okay.
Okay. Bye bye. Have a
All
good
right. It's
day.
been a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.